We're 6 days away from the start of our title defense. For UConn to three-peat, we'll need Alex Karaban to do even more. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I want to take a quick moment to share some news. Thanks to fantastic guests this month like Emily Adams, Joe Arruda, Dan Meehan doing insightful co-hosting a couple days a week, some great interviews with Eric Ryba. This has been the best month for Locked On UConn that we've ever had. Our community is growing fast, and that's all thanks to you, the listeners. Special shout out to my everydayers. And finally, as you all know, we're definitely continuing to grow, and we're committed to supporting two causes that are dear to our hearts, donating 10% of our revenue to Bleeding Blue for Good, NIL initiatives, and another 10% to Husky Ticket Project. Husky Ticket Project starts next month, so all of the proceeds that we get from October, our biggest month, luckily for Husky Ticket Project, is going to that, which I'm super excited about. That means every follow, download, and subscription helps support UConn athletes and also sends kids to experience the excitement of UConn basketball and football in underserved communities. So if you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe. It helps us out. It does make a difference for us from our community standpoint, but also makes a real difference by sending kids to games this fall. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $100, $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, we all know who Alex Karaban is. He's the linchpin of UConn's hopes for a third straight national championship. He is the only returning starter, and really the only one that Dan Hurley has said has penciled in. I think we know who the starters are going to be, but he's trying to keep that competition alive and well, and I don't blame him. So he's stepping into a role where UConn will rely on him to do more than really he ever has. Last season, he was the glue guy, a steady, high IQ presence, nicknamed the Brain Center. He made all the right reads, sets up his teammates, and held the team together. A really talented team, one of the most efficient offenses of the past 25 years in a top 6 defensive team. But this year, if the Huskies are going to make a serious run, Karaban will need to reinvent himself and elevate his game beyond just being that steady contributor. Last season, as a redshirt sophomore, Karaban set career highs with 13.3 points, 5.1 rebounds per game, while shooting an impressive 49.5% from the floor. I think he was 88.3% from free throw line and 39.7 from three. So he was this close to being a 40, 50, 90 guy, as I believe Cam Spencer was last year. He led the team in games scoring over 20 points, doing so 8 times. However, in those 8 times, as chronicled by us and other outlets, they were all done against not big time opponents. So like the way that we do the quad system in the net, quad 1 wins are your best, quad 2 are worse, 3 is terrible, 4 is low major. So against quads 2, 3, and 4, those were those 8 times over 20 points. Still impressive, but he struggled a little bit to get his shot off against more elite defensive squads that are in more of the quad 1 world. So anyway, just wanted to kind of give that context. It takes absolutely nothing away from Alex, just so if anyone's like, that doesn't matter. It does matter because, like a game against Georgetown, I think he had 24 points and he was on fire. But he's also not doing that against some of the topper flight talent. Do I think he's capable? 100%, and I think he's going to make that leap. So during UConn's recent preseason exhibition, Karaban scored 13 points on 5 of 9 shooting, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc, and added 8 rebounds and 4 assists, and a block, and a steal, in a team-high 27 minutes. These are solid numbers, but we'll need to take on even more responsibility this season. Those are kind of like workman-like numbers. And I will definitely say this. I am making a case that Alex needs to bump his production from 13, 5, and 3 to more like 16 or 17 to 8 or 9 rebounds a game, and then 4 or 5 assists. Although I'm not as worried about assists. I'm thinking about the rebounding to kind of compensate for the loss of Donovan, the scoring to counter the loss of Tristan and Cam, And he's not going to be the only one to do it. I know we don't feature anybody in UConn's offense before anyone hits me up on my YouTube mentions about how we don't need Alex to do all these things. We most certainly do. He needs to have a bigger year this year for us to be competitive again for a national championship. We're still going to be very good. I have no doubts about it, and I am very excited about this season. But he's their only returning starter, and Karaban can be counted on. But can he elevate to that next step? We'll see. Dan Hurley keeps talking about how he's, providing that spark when games are tight. He's already shown his dedication to UConn by choosing to stay. He didn't need to come back for a third time, although it's his fourth year, but third playing year. He could have put himself in the NBA. Even with Alex, if he gets a second-round grade in this year's NBA draft, I think he catches on with the team no matter what. So he's recently popped up on the preseason watch list for the Karl Malone Award and the Naismith Trophy, although I think we should probably try to change that name from the Karl Malone Award to something else. He's just look up Karl Malone and you'll know why. This commitment signals that he's ready to take on a bigger role, but the question remains, can he elevate his play even further? And I think he can. Just a matter of opportunity and all the hard work he's put in and showing it on the court, because it starts in 6 days. As UConn fans know, only 3 Huskies have won a Naismith Starting 5 award, and they all have been point guards: Kemba Walker, Shabazz Napier, and Tristan Newton. So Karaban has a chance to make history on that end. He also has a chance to make history because he'd be the only guy ever to win 3 straight national championships on the men's side. Obviously, the Breanna Stewart teams won 4 in a row on the women's side, but a third straight national championship on the men's side would be historic, and that's the standard, and Karaban is a huge part of that. So when we return, we're going to talk about Jacob Furphy and UConn's latest international talent coming up after this. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats or view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. And when you place your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com. For all new customers, that's how you get started. Get those bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto, talking a little bit about Alex Karaban and his expanded role for this coming season, as well as UConn going for a three-peat. We're 6 days away from opening tip of the title defense for a third straight national championship. It's wild to even think that, but we are here and we are embracing it. But let's shift gears. UConn's latest international commit, Jacob Furphy from Tasmania, Australia. This one flew under the radar for most. Right here on Locked On UConn, had some really good sources that told me about Jacob. One of which was another Locked On host of mine, friend, colleague, who does the Locked On Illini, about how Jacob was in Illinois and on a visit with them. And then we started talking about it. We started, kind of doing a little joint reconnaissance mission to kind of get as much information on this as possible, and come to find out that Jacob's preferred team was UConn. UConn got wind of this and obviously worked to get him on campus as quickly as possible because he's traveling from a long distance. Both Luke and Kamani, who I think were big parts of this, from what I understand, in terms of selling the vision of UConn. Obviously, Dan's a part of it too, but I'm talking about just from the recruiting work on the outside. And I think it really came down to apparently his mom signing off on him traveling so far, right? And I think obviously if you're a professional basketball player or you're close to it and you're on the cusp, as a lot of people think this kid can be, this was the move for him, because from what I've heard, there are some people in the international community, basketball community, that feel like this kid could be a pro right now, but he still has some polish to remain. He's 17. He's a big kid. He's not, what's funny is like all the other recruits, and this is no slight on Eric or Braylon or Darius, at 17, those guys are probably those size that they should be, 165, 170 pounds. Jacob is 6'5", 6'6". He's 210 pounds, guys, and he's not thick. He just has a little more meat on his bones, and it doesn't slow him down. And I think he's got kind of I think that's part of the reason why people feel like he could play the pros right now, because the physicality wouldn't bother him, because he kind of bounces off people and kind of takes contact that way. And if he plays a bigger person, that's in a man's game, then he'd have no issue. And that's kind of some of the prevailing theme I've heard from a couple different people. So he had some great things to say about UConn, explaining, quote, "I believe I have the style of play and work ethic to fit in seamlessly with the Huskies and their championship culture. I've already built great relationships with the coaching staff, which I think will serve as a great foundation to my continued growth as a player. For those not familiar, Furphy is, as I mentioned, a 6'5" lefty wing. That's how he's being kind of packaged, if you will. But this kid can play on the ball too. He can be a shooting guard. And for those of you who are stuck in 1999, where everyone has a set position, if you had to kind of give him a position, I guess you could call him a small forward. He has great court vision, smooth shooting stroke, and an impressive basketball IQ. This is exactly what we're talking about with Jacob Furphy and what Dan Hurley looks for in a recruit. Remember, I've told you guys this when I do recruiting profiles. If I'm going to my YouTube community page, because I want to pull something up that I've talked about almost not ad nauseum, but I'm going to show it here. Not going to show it, but I want to read this, which is, Dan on a recent podcast with Jim Tressel, which you guys should go check out. It's pretty fantastic. This is a quote from him. I don't recruit talented players who will make us lose. Sometimes you evaluate some of the best players in the country, and they'll prioritize their own interests over UConn's. And that's Dan Hurley. So when we say things like the right person, impressive basketball IQ, being, having the right pedigree, all of that stuff, those are things that are in consideration. Does it mean that he's less of a basketball player than some? Maybe. But remember, we're asking him to come in here and fill a role, not completely take over the culture of because the culture is set. Like, that's the thing. Like, some teams need basketball players to come in and change the culture for their team in Congress with them. But the culture at UConn is set. It's Dan Hurley has created that, and everybody around him facilitates that and uses everything in their considerable power to protect that and move it forward. He's been playing at the NBA Global Academy, another fantastic find by them, and the NBLI 1 with Australia's Basketball Center of Excellence. Australia is equivalent to the G League, which means he's faced some top competition already. NBA director Greg Colucci noted, Jacob is a crafty 6'6" lefty with excellent court vision and a great feel for the game. He plays with great pace, makes the right reads, can finish at the rim, and is an excellent three-point shooter. In the FIBA Under-18 Asian Cup, Furphy averaged 16.8 points, 4.2 assists, and nearly hit 50% from three. I think he was 49.8, proving his shooting ability is excellent and has consistency. He's also shown strong playmaking ability. I love his highlights of transition where he gets out in kind of Euro steps and is able to finish at the rim, which fits perfectly with the Hurley system that emphasizes ball movement and spacing. Furphy's IQ combined with his shooting and feel for the game will give UConn another skilled wing who can elevate the offense without needing the ball in his hands constantly. Again, another big aspect of all of these guys, whether it's Braylon, Darius, Eric, they don't need the ball in their hands constantly to be effective. Movement, cutting, spacing, horn sets, drag screens, back screens, the ability to cut. Every type of avenue that you can think of offensively, they're going to explore with these four and then mesh them with the seven that they have that'll be returning. He'll join an impressive 25 class, as just mentioned, of Darius Adams, Braylon Mullins, Eric Ryba, and with Hurley eyeing the high IQ players, Furphy looks like an absolute perfect fit, like a glove. I am super excited about Jacob. I think the funniest thing about him is me finding out that he is not related to Johnny Furphy, who's also Australian and went to Kansas. But I'm glad that he's his own Furphy. Apparently, that's a pretty common surname in Tasmania, Australia area. Who knew? When we return, around college basketball, there's some interesting debates going on about top stories. Why I think there's a few things I want to discuss. The banner debate, when you should put up a banner, when you shouldn't. UConn setting that standard. We'll talk about it coming up after this. What's up, everybody? Our friends at 5 Hour Energy know what it's like to be a fan, that no matter who you root for, being a fan takes heart and soul and a whole lot of energy. So when you're getting pumped up for a game, grab a Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy. It's their new fan fuel right there. It keeps you fueled all season long. I was super excited when Darrell Robinson's 68-yard touchdown happened to seal the win over Rice last Saturday. In a relatively boring game that was like a shot of fan fuel right in the arm. Boom. Moments like these are what all of us are looking for when we watch sports. So what's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn, final segment of the program. Really interested to see how Alex comes out in his first few games, if he's going to take charge. And it looked like it a little bit. Like if you could, I mean, it's hard to tell from an exhibition, but the idea is that he, really needs to, as the year goes on, ramp up his production. That's all. I'm not asking him to take 50 more shots a game. I'm asking him to give me, 3 or 4 more points a game. It's a pretty big leap. Maybe 2 or 3 extra rebounds to get him about 7. If he's at 17 and 7 this year, which is, I think, is a reasonable ask, or close to 17, 16.5, something like that, we're going to be in great shape. And then obviously not something that we talked about a lot today, but Ada Mahaney, Dan was talking about that too. I think John Rothstein, about how if he needs him to be kind of in the middle of Tristan and Cam. That's also something I've said during the transfer portal season, that if he can come in and be that kind of combo of those two guys, add his own little flavor, then UConn's going to be in a really good chance to be in that three-peat conversation. But let's get back to and we talked about Jacob. Obviously, I think he's phenomenal, and we're going to definitely dive back into the recruits and everything that comes with them. We're having Braylon Mullins on next week. We're going to record next week. I can't promise the show will be out next week, but again, Braylon Mullins will join us for an interview like Eric Ryba did. Love to get Jacob on. I don't know how that would be possible if he's back in Australia or when he's back in the States, but I really want to talk through around college basketball, some of the top stories that we're seeing. Obviously UConn. I feel like if UConn's three-peat quest isn't the lead story for college basketball, then we're failing as a media organization, not only just from my perspective, but media as a whole, because media as a whole, as you can kind of pick and choose what you want to watch and listen. You can live in whatever bubble you truly want to live in. We're kind of in a post-fact society. So if you feel like you want to believe that Duke has the greatest team since sliced bread because they won a exhibition game by 56 points, then there are about 20 different Duke shows that you can watch. That I'm sure, and there's one here on Locked On Network. If you feel like Dan Hurley and his teams are the standard, then you come watch me. But so you get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like when reporters, like the article I read about, I think his name is Jeff Eisenberg from Yahoo Sports, talking about like the top 68 stories of the season. And I thought that was a really interesting read. Some really cool stuff in there. Some stuff I don't agree with. Like, for example, and people are going to think I'm doing this on purpose to get clicks. Like the Cooper Flag stuff. I love great basketball players. So I hope Cooper Flag has a great year. But the idea that he'd be a bigger story than a team going for a three-peat just because he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft next year is silly. It just is. Also, has anyone watched Cooper Flag play? Cooper Flag is not Kevin Durant. He is not Carmelo Anthony. He is kind of this generation's type player. He's kind of a little bit of do with everything. Con Knipple is probably the kid that's going to score the most points for Duke because he's going to get the most open looks because there's going to be a ton of opportunity with Cooper to kind of dish off to him. I still think he's going to be a double-digit scorer. Kalen Malik, the South Sudanese player, is another guy that Duke has that is going to be – those 3 freshmen are going to be a handful this year. And I think that's the story, is that they actually have surrounded this team with a ton of talent. But as my co-host the other day said, I don't know if Duke can overcome some of the shortcomings from a coaching perspective that I think I've witnessed over the first few years of John Shire. Now, granted, has he had the amount of talent that he has now? No, but he's certainly had some McDonald's All-Americans that would be fine if they played other places, and some of them actually are now. My old friend Wes Miller's Cincinnati team, I think, is about to have a revival. I think they're going to show. I think he's really going to show people why he was kind of the favorite to succeed Roy Williams at UNC, and because Hubert was already on the staff and really kind of made an impression. I think Roy was loyal to him for being on that staff for years. But I think if you gave Roy Williams some truth serum, he would tell you that Wes is the right person for that job, and likely will end up being the North Carolina coach at some point in his career. But I think Cincinnati is poised to make a nice leap this year in the Big 12. I think they're going to surprise people and challenge for the Big 12 title. They had some nice wins last year. The majority of their losses last year were by one or two possessions tops in that kind of gauntlet of the Big 12. Tony Bennett's retirement is still kind of stuck in my craw. I think Tony Bennett's a fantastic person, but I think between him and some of the other coaches across sports who have used NIL as the impetus and the built-in excuse to kind of move on, to me kind of reeks of kind of desperation, because Tony Bennett knows he's a good coach. He's always been a fantastic developer of people, developer of talent in the old way. But what does Moneyball tell us? Adapt or die, right? That's that Brad Pitt title from Billy Beane in Oakland. And by the way, I'm not a huge Moneyball fan. When I reference it, it kind of makes me laugh, because I think that's one of the silliest movies of all time. That Oakland team had so many good players on it. To think that they were like, the Chicago White Sox of this year, but they just started to implement, analytics, and all of a sudden it changed everything. Analytics are definitely a part of all sports now, and it likely was started by Oakland in that. But that team had some of the best pitching in all of baseball. They had the MVP in Miguel Tejada. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Kansas and Bill Self's reloaded roster. I think Bill Self has made sure to address Kansas's roster issues. I'm interested to see how they will play and mesh this year. I think the interesting thing that bothers me about how UConn doesn't get enough credit for stuff is they've been able to turn over the roster and still be credible every year after they won championships. But we still give benefit of the doubt to guys like Bill Self, to guys like John Shire and others that really haven't won in this NIL era and are dealing with turnover. And we don't necessarily know if they can do it. But yet here we are, Kansas number 1 or number 2 in most polls. I don't know if that's going to be the case. You still have to put the product on the court. Rutgers has really high expectations with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey is fantastic. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. I think he's actually going to be a better player in college than Cooper Flagg, just because he's more of a scorer, and you're going to be able to kind of see that more on a regular basis. Also, if they get into that top 25, he's 100% going to get a lot more love. I think Princeton has some Cinderella potential. They're the Ivy League favorite. They returned 2 key stars, Caden Pierce and Xavion Lee, who turned down power conference offers to stay with the Tigers. Princeton is shaping up to be a Cinderella team to watch come March. And then let's get into this banner stuff. Purdue is unveiling a runner-up banner. I don't know if that's like, it just so reeks of mediocrity. And I know that people are going to make that, case that I'm being a homer, and okay, maybe I am. But if your team didn't, I make one caveat in this whole banner or ring thing or whatever. You should never get a Final Four ring. You should never get an Elite 8 ring. Yes, Creighton, I'm talking to you. You should never get a Sweet 16 ring. Okay? If it's your first time making the NCAA tournament, you're a mid-major or an HBCU, and you want to give your players a ring to commemorate the first time that's happened, that's cool. I'm totally down for that. And then as the high major goes, if it's the first time you make a Final Four, give everybody participation trophies, because that's an accomplishment that's kind of like a leveling up of your program. If you're a mid-major like Butler or Florida Atlantic that made the run to the Final Four, and you're probably never going to get there again, then totally get your banner, get your rings, all of that stuff. But I know Purdue hasn't won a national championship since like 1939 or whatever it was before it actually like counted. But dude, to put up a runner-up trophy or banner, that's just so weird. I mean, I think programs like UConn that celebrate only championship success is really kind of where it should be. And I think we're just doing it to celebrate, people are going to look at that banner and go, oh yeah, we had Zach Edey and then we got our asses kicked by UConn. Great. Okay. Yeah, but it's really weird behavior to be giving people rings for the Elite Eight and runner-up banners and all this other stuff. Indiana's possible return to glory. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think Mike Woodson is a good coach. I said it. He's built enough through the portal where they should get themselves into the NCAA tournament. But do you need the track record of playing in these one and done tournaments? And he doesn't have it. So I think Alabama is going to be one of the tougher teams this year. I think Nate Oates is a counter to Dan Hurley. I think they are 100% the biggest threat to UConn's three-peat. They mix high-caliber transfers. They have 5 returning rotation players. They have some talented freshmen. They have Cliff Amarui, who's a fantastic defensive player and a rim runner. I think that they're going to be really good. So that's it for today's show. Thanks for joining us on Locked On UConn. From Karaban's leadership to Furphy's commitment to the debate over what really means to celebrate excellence, we're setting a high bar here for that here with the Huskies. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe again, follow wherever you listen. And remember that supporting the show helps us give back to UConn athletes and the Husky Ticket Project. So stay locked on, stay connected, and as always, go Huskies.